For 105 days, Adolf Hitler lived underground while Berlin burned above him. What happened in those final hours in the Führerbunker has been pieced together from the testimony of the few who survived, including Traudl Junge, Hitler's personal secretary, who witnessed the dramatic events unfolding on April 29, 1945. As you descend into the bunker, you are met with the eerie realization that Hitler's fate was all but sealed, and you might wonder, what drove him to remain in the city as the Soviet army closed in on Berlin, just 300 meters from the bunker's entrance. In the months leading up to Hitler's final days, the Allied forces had been making significant gains, with the Soviet Union capturing key cities such as Budapest on February 13, 1945, and the Western Allies crossing the Rhine River on March 22, 1945. The German army was in disarray, with estimated losses of over 400,000 soldiers on the Eastern Front alone, and the economy was on the brink of collapse, with inflation soaring to over 300% by the end of 1944. As the situation grew more desperate, Hitler became increasingly isolated, relying on a small circle of advisors, including Joseph Goebbels, Hermann Göring, and Martin Bormann, who would ultimately play a crucial role in the events that unfolded. You might ask, how did Hitler's inner circle respond to the impending doom, and what measures did they take to ensure their own survival? On April 22, 1945, Hitler's mood shifted dramatically, as he realized that the war was lost, and he began to make preparations for his own death, ordering the destruction of all sensitive documents and equipment in the bunker. 7 days later, on April 29, 1945, Hitler married his longtime companion, Eva Braun, in a small ceremony in the bunker's map room, with only a handful of witnesses, including Goebbels and Bormann, in attendance. The next day, April 30, 1945, Hitler held his final military conference, where he learned of the Soviet army's rapid advance on Berlin, and the failure of his generals to hold back the enemy, leading to a dramatic deterioration in his mental state. As the reality of his situation set in, Hitler's behavior became increasingly erratic, and you might wonder, what was going through his mind as he contemplated the end of the Third Reich. At 3:30 p.m. on April 30, 1945, Hitler and Eva Braun retired to their private quarters, where they took their own lives, marking the end of an era, and the beginning of a new chapter in world history. The bodies were then carried outside to the Reich Chancellery Garden, where they were doused in gasoline and set on fire, in accordance with Hitler's wishes, as witnessed by SS guards, Otto Gunsch and Heinz Ling. As the flames consumed the bodies, the remaining Nazi leadership, including Goebbels and Bormann, began to make their own escape plans, with some attempting to flee the city, while others, like Goebbels, chose to remain with their families, and face the inevitable. In the aftermath of Hitler's death, the Soviet army, led by General Vasily Chukov, continued their relentless advance on Berlin, capturing the city on May 2, 1945, and marking the end of the war in Europe. The Soviet forensic investigation, led by Colonel Vladimir Gorbushin, confirmed Hitler's death, through the analysis of dental records and eyewitness testimony, putting an end to speculation about his possible escape. As the news of Hitler's death spread, the remaining Nazi leaders, including Karl Donitz and Alfred Jodl, began to surrender, marking the beginning of the end of the Third Reich, and the start of a long and difficult process of rebuilding and reconciliation. And you might ask, what lessons can be learned from the devastating consequences of Hitler's actions? As you reflect on the events that unfolded in the Führerbunker, you are left with a haunting question: what would have happened if Hitler had been stopped earlier, and the world had been spared the atrocities of the Holocaust, and the devastation of World War II? And the answer, much like the remains of Hitler's body, remains lost in the ashes of history.